Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'd like to offer my respectful obeisances to all the assembled Vaishnavas. This is the last of a few verses that are talking about Krishna's Grihastha ashram, his householder life with his queens. So I need the blessings of the Vaishnavas to fully understand and realize and completely take to heart the transcendental nature of the Lord's most intimate pastimes. So that's why I'm asking for the blessings of the Vaishnavas right now. Thank you. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu vaibhacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha ananta koti vaishnavrinam ki jai. So today, I guess I see what I've done. We're doing Srimad Bhagawatam Canto 3, Status Quo, Chapter 3, Remembering Lord Krishna Outside of Vrindavan. And verse 23, the last of those few verses, 19 through 23, that are acknowledging and respecting, validating the transcendental nature of Krishna's relationship with his 16,108 queens of Dwarka and their transcendental exemplary qualities. Daiva dineshu, kameshu, daiva dineshu, kameshu, Daiva Dinesha Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogina Yogeshwara Manuvrata Daiva Dineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogina Yogeshwaram Anurataha Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogena Yogeshwaram Anurataha Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogena Yogeshwaram Anurataha Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogena Yogeshwaram Anuvrata Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishrambita Yogena Yogeshwara Manurata. Synonyms: Daiva, supernatural. Adineshu, being controlled. Kameshu, in sense enjoyment. Daiva Adina, controlled by supernatural force. Swayam, himself. Human, living entity. Ka, whoever. Vishram Beta, can have faith in. Yogena, by devotional service. Yogeshwaram, the Supreme Lord. Anuvrata, serving. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Every living entity is controlled by a supernatural force, and thus his sense enjoyment is also under the control of that supernatural force. No one, therefore, can put his faith in Lord Krishna's transcendental sense activities, but, and then I wrote, except one who has become a devotee of the Lord by rendering devotional service. Repeat after me. Every living entity is controlled by a supernatural force. And thus his sense enjoyment is also under the control of that supernatural force. No one, therefore, can put his faith in Lord Krishna's transcendental sense activities, but, or except, one who has become a devotee of the Lord by rendering devotional service. This is telling. This is a very, very, and Srila Prabhupada speaks volumes in the purport. I'm really grateful for Srila Prabhupada's elaboration on these verses. He really gets to the heart of the matter. But before I go on, I wanted to just go over the last verses, 19, 20, 21, and 22, because they're in a group, and I just wanted to pull them all together before we go on to the next little section. So it says here, text 19, simultaneously the personality of God had enjoyed life in the city of Dwarka, strictly in conformity with the Vedic customs of society. He was situated in detachment and knowledge as enunciated by the Sankhya system of philosophy. Text 20. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune, with his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. Text 21. The Lord enjoyed his pastimes both in this world and in other worlds, higher planets, specifically in the association of the Yadu dynasty. At leisure hours, offered by night, he enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. Text 22. The Lord was thus engaged in householder life for many years, and at last his detachment from ephemeral sex life was fully manifest. Purport. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, no one can understand the transcendental birth and activities of the Lord. The same fact is herein corroborated. No one, but one who is enlightened by devotional service of the Lord, can understand the difference between the Lord's activities and those of others who are controlled by supernatural force. So right away we think about this. It's like, again and again, we're told to hear, repeat, remember the pastimes of the Lord. In this way, we become purified. In this way, we get understanding by hearing, especially from the lips of a pure devotee. Srila Prabhupada in his purports really enlightens us as to the full scope of Lord Krishna's unique difference, in the juxtaposition between we and he, the greatness of Krishna and the tiny insignificance of ourselves. And what is a supernatural force? It's coming from Krishna. So if it's coming from him, he's not controlled by it. The sense enjoyment of all animals, men and demigods, within the purview of the material universe is controlled by the supernatural force called Prakriti or Devi Maya. No one is independent in obtaining sense enjoyment, and everyone in this material world is after sense enjoyment. Even this little bee here, I had to get up really early in the morning to get this picture because I wanted to take the picture of the night blooming cereus, and it starts to close up as soon as the sun comes up. And I got the good fortune of catching a bee trying to collect some early morning nectar there. So he's after his, he's doing his duty collecting nectar, and he's also doing his duty collecting nectar for the sense enjoyment of the whole hive. Persons who are themselves under the control of supernatural power cannot believe that Lord Krishna is not under any control beyond himself in the matter of sense enjoyment. Because we think, it's like the frog philosophy we were discussing the other day. We think we have only so much understanding, and we don't think bigger than ourselves. We think our well is just this big and it's the whole world. And so we're not thinking greater than. But for the devotee, they're constantly seeing somebody is better than they are. They're always giving credit where credit's due. They're saying, I'm not this great person. Look to this other person who's far greater than I. And then ultimately they're looking to Krishna. That greatness is a reflection. As the sun gives beautiful energy, the moon reflects it. The devotees are like so many moons. They cannot understand that Krishna's senses, his senses, are transcendental. In the Brahma Samhita, the Lord's senses are described as omnipotent. This is so important. With any sense, he can perform the activities of the other senses. Who can do that? Who can do that? We can't. Only Krishna can do this. One who has limited senses cannot believe that the Lord can eat by his transcendental power of hearing, and he can perform the act of sex simply by seeing. Who can understand these things? Just by seeing Krishna seeing us, and Krishna seeing his beloveds, then automatically the most intimate experience can be had. The controlled living entity cannot even dream of such sense activities in his conditional life. I mean, it just kind of, the mind just goes, how can we understand it? But by hearing about it and trying to stretch the brain and heart to understand the unlimited nature of Krishna, then automatically we are getting that blessing, the touch by the lips of our Guru Maharaj. He is opening our eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, as we're saying. And by continuing to hear and repeat these wonderful pastimes, gradually, and doing service to Krishna, we get it. It's like, wow. We will actually, in this life, it's guaranteed that by engaging in this process, we can, in this life, get the darshan and the touch of Krishna if we fully surrender. So it's just beautiful. So by practicing, it's saying here, but simply by the activities of Bhakti Yoga, one can understand that the Lord and his activities are always transcendental. My activities may be motivated by maybe just dharma, duty. I'm getting up and I'm doing everything that I have to do out of dharma. But gradually, that becomes purified. And I remember when I saw my father in a coma, and he was kind of delusional and hallucinating, and he was retired 12 years. He still thought he was on the job, even though he was retired for 12 years. He was saying, talking, bring me my clipboard. We're going to put the driveway in right here. He was a civil engineer. So he had been retired 12 years. Still, he was in that space of his occupational duty that he'd been performing. So what to speak of the beautiful life that Srila Prabhupada has given us, this lovely life, that even if we're delusional, we can be, I can't get the lighter to work to light the incense, or, like we can have some anxiety, but what is it? It's in relation to Krishna. Somehow or other, it's in relation to service. Or we can be delusional, like Markandeya can be like, I'm doing arti, because he's been doing arti for years and years and years. So it's a samskar, it's ingrained. It's a deep impression in the psyche. This is our identity as Krishna's Sevite. So Prabhupada has given us this lovely life, and that we're under the control of Krishna. And so we can imagine that Krishna can eat with his eyes or eat with his ears or any such thing, because we're offering him every single day plates of prasad, and that becomes prasad, his mercy. He looked at it. He consumed it. It was for his pleasure. So we're training ourselves in this consciousness, so we can gradually just get it. And as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktyamam ajinati yavanyas chasmin tat vataha, one cannot know even a fraction of the activities of the Lord if he is not a pure devotee of the Lord. Look at Narada Muni. He's traveling all over everywhere, all over the universe, chanting Hare Krishna, also being kind of a transcendental troublemaker wherever he goes, telling the truth. So it's really what can happen when you tell the truth. Better he moves right along quickly, because the truth generally can get people pretty riled up. And it can be self-evident, but they can oppose it so vehemently, like the truth that Krishna can eat with his eyes, or just by glancing, he can engage in the act of sexual pleasure with anyone. It takes new meaning to darshan, the word of darshan, where we're going before. We just heard in a couple of classes ago that the devotee wants Krishna to see him. Because why? They're in love. I want Krishna to see me. Everything's about his pleasure. It's not about, I'm going to enjoy Krishna. I mean, this is my biggest problem, is I come and I enjoy the deities. I enjoy seeing how they're dressed. I'm trying to transfer the account that I'm here for Krishna, and I'm here for him to enjoy me being here. But unfortunately, I haven't quite transferred the entire account. I'm enjoying singing and dancing for the Lord. I'm enjoying these things, but that's lust. That's for my pleasure. Real love is for the pleasure of the beloved, not looking for anything for ourselves. So gradually, in a life of devotion, where we may be transferring to the point where, okay, I really enjoy this, but now it's about Krishna's pleasure, not about mine. It's about the deity's pleasure. So when we perform our function, we're not just doing it out of routine duty. We're doing it for his pleasure, like that we really are looking for his pleasure, for his smile, for his enjoyment. So this word supernatural force, that was because it's stated twice in this verse. 2 times it said supernatural force. So wanted to look it up and look in the thesaurus and see also what they used for that. And the natural force is a supernatural force is believed to dwell in a person or sacred object. And the second meaning was power or authority. And in it says Maori, integrity, charisma, prestige. And the thesaurus was, for, of course, Hawaii was mana. I had to look up the Hawaiian one since we're here. And it's mana is also exactly the same meaning. And then I thought Shakti is also that meaning in Sanskrit. And so I looked Shakti up, and it's the energy or the ability or effort, power, capacity. And it is primordial cosmic energy, and it represents the dynamic forces that are thought to move through the entire universe. And this is within Hinduism. So every culture has some conception of a supernatural force, this Shakti, this mana. And when we think of it, it's like I automatically think of those opulences of Krishna. That supernatural force is really coming from Krishna, and it can be either his Yoga Maya or his Mahamaya. Both are his energies. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, when he looked at this verse, he explained it by saying, this verse explains the Lord's detachment in his activities. If the Lord has detachment from his actions, which are not subject to karma, that person will have affection, Vishrambeta, for his own actions, which produce karma, Daividina. If he practices bhakti yoga, he surrenders to the Lord of yoga. And this brings to mind Srila Prabhupada's statement that he said, if one is actually detached, he acts very, very attached because he's transcendental. So he acts very detached. He can very attached, very loving, very affectionate. He's very gracious. He can be accommodating, always thinking about his beloved because he's super detached. It's like myself. If I remember in the early days when they'd ask me to speak a little something in Vrindavan, I would be a nervous wreck and I'd just practically die because there's so many scholars there. I mean, you know, Digby Jai folks, really smart people. But then if the subject matter was about Prabhupada, you know, I could speak of something short and sweet, and with affection, gradually I got comfortable with it by being detached. But in the beginning, I'm attached. And so there's nervousness, and that nervousness can come out kind of funny. It's like, it's not graceful in the slightest. In fact, if we're really, really attached, we can even be rude and crude and lewd and very rude and not nice. And we can act like, you know, we're really detached, like, hey, I don't care. But we care so much. Prabhupada said if one is attached, then they act detached, like, dismissive, offensive, because they're so darn attached. So Krishna is the most detached. Renunciation is his greatest opulence. So he can be the most loving of husbands, the most doting of fathers. He can be so gracious because he is the possessor of full-blown detachment, renunciation. That opulence is his. So we should be so detached that we could be affectionate and loving and caring amongst ourselves. We're very detached. Our ego is no longer an issue. We won't get all scuffed up and we have to be defensive and everything. We're just like Haridas Thakur, beaten in 21 marketplaces, but still he went on chanting. And if he was in distress, he said, my real problem is I can't finish my rounds. Totally detached, totally graceful. Totally graceful. We should be so detached. We should be so graceful. And if we can't be, we should act as if we are. To get into character, that devotional character, following in the footsteps of Krishna. That's a acting technique. It's method acting where we act as if we are detached and Krishna conscious. And when you get into that character, it becomes you. You become it. So this is what the Uttama Adhikari, he shows us how to behave He shows us how to walk and how to talk. Srila Prabhupada was graceful. That's why we say his divine grace, because he was so gracious and graceful. Even the wave of his hand, he had long golden fingers, and just the slightest twist of his hand, the slightest gesture, you just were like, I mean, you fell in love just by looking at Srila Prabhupada, just by hearing Srila Prabhupada, because he was giving us Krishna completely. So you might say, oh, he looks like he might be an old man. We were in love with Prabhupada. Everybody was in love with Srila Prabhupada. We hung on his every word, his every gesture. We hung on it because it was worthy of our attention and our affection. And we were getting so much revelation and Krishna consciousness from each and every gesture and word that Srila Prabhupada made. And that's why every single time we tell even the same story, it's actually giving us more and more import and input into our own understanding of our relationship with Krishna. Prabhupada is transparent via media. He gives us, he enlightens us as to our relationship with Krishna. So in Bhagavad Gita, in the opulence of the Absolute, it says, all wondrous phenomenon showing power, beauty, grandeur, or sublimity, either in the material world or in the spiritual, but partial manifestations of Krishna's divine energies and opulence as the supreme cause of all causes and support and essence of everything. Krishna is the supreme object of worship for all beings. His opulences are the superior force, this super excellent force. Whether it's material or spiritual, it doesn't matter. Krishna is in control of both the Mahamaya and the Yogamaya. And for the devotee, we see everything in relation to Krishna, so even as Mahamaya becomes Yogamaya. We do not need to be deluded by it, thinking, I'm going to enjoy this. This Mahamaya is here for my pleasure. No, we're seeing it in relation to Krishna. It becomes transformed to Yogamaya. It's for his pleasure. Now, I was looking here because this whole section is all about Krishna's householder life with his queens. And he was exemplary. He did everything perfectly, as it says in verse 19, according to Vedic injunction. He was the perfect example of how to live householder life. He set that example for us. Not only he made the rules, but he also followed them and showed us how to behave. He lived amongst us, and had people been blinded by his supremacy there with that of Shwarya, they probably couldn't have even functioned to just be in awe. And as it says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, love is made feeble by that awe and reverence. So Krishna doesn't want our love to be feeble by the awe and reverence, so he simply lives amongst us and sets example of how to behave so that we can follow, not get blinded by his great amazingness. We could just be blinded and scorched, not really being able to see if we could not get past the Aishwarya. So Krishna lived amongst us, and his primary queen was Rukmini. And as we had heard recently that King Vajranabha was the son of Aniruddha, who was the son of Pradyumna. So also Satyabhama and Jambavati. And I was just reading about Jambavati and how she was sonless for a while, and she was saying, Krishna, I don't have any children, and this isn't fair. All the other queens are having, children, and I'm not. Please, please, please. And she begets Samba, who has really, in the history of sons, a few rascally activities that he's engaged in, and we've just recently heard about how he was spoofing the Saptarishis. The rishis couldn't be spoofed. They were offended. You don't play tricks or jokes on someone who's really superior to you. It reminds me of the time I played it was April Fools, and we all know April Fools is we play jokes on people. And in Holi and Vrindavan, it's a time that actually, astrologically, they say it's a time that you can play jokes on the teachers. They play jokes on their teachers. They have kind of a get out of jail free card on that. The women are beating the men. You know, it's very interesting. It's like, okay, you get one time of the year that you can be a real upstart and you don't get into trouble, but generally you do. You can't play a joke on a superior. One time I put salt in my father's sugar container for April Fools, and he put salt in his coffee. Ooh, he was super angry. He just poured it on the floor and made me clean it up. But so that wasn't, yeah, that was not a good idea to play a joke on my superior. And so Samba made that mistake. He was, as we had heard earlier in the chapter, Krishna was fathoming, oh boy, if I leave my clan, the Yadavas behind, you know, they're not to be defeated by anyone. They can't die of normal means. Well, I need them to come with me, because without me, they could get themselves into big trouble and they could burden the whole world. So Samba was one of those folks, and he continuously was doing tricky things, and he got himself into trouble time and time again. He looked as beautiful as Krishna, and he often pretended to be Krishna and played jokes. And when Krishna found out about it, Krishna was, you know, he was upset. As a father, you're impersonating me? Like, I'm not. And so he cursed him to get leprosy. And so he came, you know, Samba came to him, please, oh no, this is terrible. And so Krishna said, you worship the sun god. And he did for 12 years. And a lot of the temples in India that are temples to the sun were established by Samba, including the sun god temple in Konark that was established by Samba. So in 12 years, he was cured. He looked beautiful again, but there was still a little pock here and there, so everyone could see, you're not Krishna, you're playing this joke, we can tell you're Samba. So his power to be such a rascal was over. Still, Krishna was really tricky about the way in which he utilized even curses were blessings, because everything can be engaged in Krishna's service. He was just like with Hiranyakashipu, he asked for all these benedictions, and Krishna fulfilled each and every single one of them. And when Gandhari got upset with Krishna because she knew that he had tricked Duryodhana into having a weak spot, you know, and that Bhima could attack Krishna, Duryodhana right here on the groin, right here on the thigh, because Krishna told him, like right here, because that's where the place that, as Gandhari had put this in her total Brahma Tejas on him, he could be not defeated at all. And poor Bhima, who nobody could say poor Bhima, but in this case, he was getting beat up. And then Krishna gave that message right here. And so he started to just club the heck out of Duryodhana right there, and he defeated him at that. And Gandhari was so angry, and Krishna thought, okay, this is going to come in handy, because I need my Yadavas to come back with me. And so her curse, thank you very much. Just like there's so many, you think about all these curses that go on, they're really blessings, because they suit Krishna's will. They suit Krishna's Leela. So here in the Bhagavatam, it's saying, after offering such prayers at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, Sri Uddhava revealed his desire to know about the Lord's various opulences in heaven, on earth, and hell, and in all directions. I was really concentrating on the supernatural power. I really wanted to understand Krishna's opulences. We are so bewildered by them when we want to enjoy them. When we want them for us, we get bewildered by Krishna's opulences. If we're seeing them as his and we're seeing them for his pleasure, there's no question of being bewildered by Krishna's opulences. And it's Lord Krishna then described all these opulences, after which he commented that all power, beauty, opulence, humility, charity, charm, good fortune, valor, tolerance, and wisdom, wherever they are manifest, are simply expansions of himself. And so Prabhupada says, do not be puffed up by borrowed plumes, because they're Krishna's. We might have a plume for a minute, but they're Krishna's, so we should not be puffed up by them. They're going to be Krishna's in the end. They were in the beginning, and in the meanwhile, he might let us use one or two. Let us use those plumes in his service. That's the idea. It therefore cannot be truthfully said that a material object actually possesses these opulences. No object can. It's only when it's invested by Krishna. And because of the connection with Krishna, these opulences are supernatural. It's a force. The word Bhagavan is explained by Parashara Muni, who is one who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, is Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While Krishna was present on this earth, he displayed all 6 opulences. Therefore, great sages like Parashara Muni have all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I wanted to look at the verse again. Every living entity is controlled by a supernatural force, and thus his sense enjoyment is also under the control of that supernatural force. And I got some pictures of, wealth, beauty, knowledge. Everyone can be smitten by Cupid. These things are supernatural forces that we can't really resist unless we're dovetailing everything in relation to Krishna. No one can therefore put his faith in Lord Krishna's transcendental sense activities except one who has become a devotee of the Lord. So the devotee of the Lord is very, very special because they understand Krishna's sense activities. They understand his transcendental nature. A devotee is very, very special, and we can get so much mercy from the devotee. This understanding is coming through them. Jai Panchatattva. But how Srila Prabhupada engages us in rendering devotional service, Jai Panchatattva. He engages us. The more service we render to the Lord, the more we become qualified. And the more service we render in love and affection, the more we become qualified. And when you think about this, you look back and you think, now who were these amazing people? Well, Grandfather Bhishma, he was a Naistika brahmachari. He was completely made a vow of celibacy his whole life. But he himself, the grandfather of the Kurus and the Pandavas, Bhishma himself, swore to the great vow of lifelong celibacy and strictly true to the principles of religion. At the time of passing away, he praised the personality of Godhead by telling of the excellence of the young women of Raj. So that seems incongruous, but it shows the transcendental nature of the Lord's activities of amorous affairs or even householder affairs. The commentary there is, it's wonderful as it is that Akrura appreciated the gopis. It is even more amazing that Bhishma, a warrior and lifelong celibate, who should know nothing about such things, also glorified these young girls. As Bhishma lay on the bed of arrows on the Kurukshetra battle, just before he left his body, he sang the glories of Krishna's girlfriends in Vrindavan. How transcendental is that? This was the same Bhishma who was a strict Naistika brahmachari, a kshatriya more interested in warfare than romantic concerns. The same Bhishma who dueled with his own guru Parashuram, the Supreme Lord's incarnation, and shot cruel arrows at Krishna. Arjuna's chariot driver, such a great authority as Bhishma that that if he considers the gopis so elevated, surely they must be. This is proof of the transcendental nature of Krishna's amorous affairs. And then when this is a picture of Grandfather Bhishma, such an elevated soul who waited to get Krishna's darshan before passing away. And he praised all the activities of the Lord. He praised them. Grandfather Bhishma set such an example. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Brahman Pradyumna Misra and all of us about the glories of Sri Krishna's rasa dance described in Bhagavatam. And Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami joined Ramananda Roy to intimately serve Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and together they helped Mahaprabhu taste the loving ecstasies of a Madhurya Ras. In his Gambhira Leela, Sri Chaitanya would stay up all night enraptured in Srimati Radharani's mood of separation from Shyamadar. Ramananda Roy was the first person to reveal the deep varieties of ras which Lord Chaitanya privately savored within himself. He saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the combined form of Rasaraj Mahabhav. Rasaraj Sri Krishna and Mahabhav Swarupini Sri Radha now appeared in one beautiful, dazzling form. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Any questions or comments?
You were talking about this supernatural energy recognized among other people. I think it was recognized best in 1977 in Star Wars when it said, "May the Force be with you always." Luke Skywalker.
May Krishna's blessings be with you too, Lalit. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.